1 year after its formation, Trinity Lutheran Church was led to open a school in Utica, Michigan, based on the Word of God. Through recessions, depressions, 2 world wars, 26 presidential administrations, from the invention of the automobile to the smartphone, this Christian school has been sharing the gospel message with children at the corner of Hall Road and Van Dyke for 140 years. A lot has changed since 1883, but Jesus Christ and His message remains the same. We wish we could include everyone who's played a role at Trinity, and we're thankful for the myriads of faculty members, students, families, and others who've contributed to the history of our Christian school. To thank everyone and include them in this video would take hours. To celebrate our 140th anniversary, let's take a look at events big and small throughout the history of Trinity Lutheran School, from where we were nearly a century and a half ago to where we are today. Where 2 or 3 gather in my name, there I am with them. This passage from the book of Matthew guided a small group of German Lutherans meeting above the old Utica Bank on March 4th, 1882, to discuss organizing a new Christian congregation. They decided to seek pledges so they could purchase a piece of property on Summer Street, then called James Street, and build Trinity's first church building where our students currently play kickball. On March 29, 1882, the name Trinity Evangelical Lutheran Church of Utica was selected. Dedicated to the glory of God on August 20th, 1882, the church was built with the idea that it could be converted into a school when the young congregation could afford a more substantial sanctuary. Just to the east of the new church, the congregation decided to build a parsonage. The parsonage was designed with a wing attached that could serve as a temporary school. So, from the very beginning, Trinity's leadership was not only dedicated to gathering people together to worship God, but also to provide a place for students to learn. On June 7th, 1883, Reverend Adolf Klaus accepted a call to become Trinity's first permanent pastor and day school teacher, a position he held until his retirement in 1895. Upon his arrival in 1883, he immediately went about establishing Trinity Lutheran School, following St. Paul's directive that children should be brought up in the training and instruction of the Lord. In the 1880s, Utica was a small farm town of about 500 people. It was a blossoming area, but back then, even all of Macomb County had less than 32,000 people. Much of the land around Trinity was empty and reserved for farming and agriculture. A number of buildings have served our students at Trinity since its inception in 1883 that are no longer standing on our campus. This here is an example of the oldest existing portion of Trinity's church and school. We currently use this space as our art room, but back in the 50s, this was more than one classroom. Our current school office and our faculty lounge were also classrooms. A construction project that began in 1955 added 4 new classrooms on this floor, as well as space in the basement that was converted into classrooms just a year or 2 later as Trinity grew. The project continued into 1956 when the center part of our current sanctuary was built. It's easy to see that classrooms have definitely been updated since the 1950s, as you look at one of our BenQ boards here. Our students today might not be too agreeable to having class while sitting on a split basswood log bench without a desk, like Trinity students did in 1883. Back then, students used horn books and were excited to use their brand new tablets, which never needed recharging. Older students would use quill pens made from turkey feathers. And of course, Trinity students would never dip a classmate's hair in an inkwell. Although these classrooms are the oldest we have on campus, let's travel back in time to the year 1883 to a place where Trinity students first learned about this world and Jesus. Oh, well, here we are. You made it with me. We are standing outside of the original Trinity Lutheran School, built in 1883. So although the oldest part of our current campus goes back to 1955, this parsonage was built in 1883. That young church decided to build a parsonage with a wing that would be big enough to host classes when they first started the school. So it was a parsonage by night and a school by day. Pastor Klaus would teach the older kids in the church building, and his wife would teach the younger kids while she went about her household duties. So I guess it was a parsonage by day and by night. But this is where Trinity Lutheran School started 140 years ago. So here we are with Paul, the current owner of this house. And Paul, you probably never figured when you bought this house a couple years ago that you'd be filming a documentary in your living room, did you?
No, absolutely I did not, no.
So when Paul bought this house, he's been doing some renovation. Have you found anything interesting in the home while you've been rehabbing the house?
Yeah, actually I have. I've found plenty of articles, old newspapers dating back from the city of Utica from 1935 to 1950s. I've also found some German written literature that probably well succeeds that. And I found like this baseball glove, for instance.
That is not a modern day baseball glove.
No, absolutely not.
So Paul, there's a lot of work you've done in this house. I'm interested to know, would you like me to volunteer some of our kids at school to come over and give you a hand?
Well, you have an abundance of children over there. I could use all the hands possible.
Okay, I'll send over a crew of first graders with some paintbrushes.
Deal.
The house is moved, but not very far. The parsonage originally sat in this location here, and it looked like this. In 1922, the parsonage became a teacherage, and Trinity built a new parsonage along Van Dyke Avenue. Trinity, as well as our surrounding area, experienced quite a bit of growth following World War II. In preparation of upcoming building projects, the white frame building was sold to Trinity member Elmer Bechter. In 1952, they moved the home around the corner to the property that they had purchased from Trinity principal Win Grebner. Current member Howard Bechter grew up in this home just steps away from his grade school.
We lived in a block home, garage home, in back of the church house there, which we moved that over from here to where it's at now. And we moved there, I was 12.
And so the house originally stood in this area here.
Yeah, right in here.
And your family moved it from here.
From here, they slid it there all the way over. They kept building up the boards. Usually they put it on wheels, but they said it was so close, so they dug the hole, then they put it across the top, they poured the footings, put the block on it, and then...
So the house sat there, and then they poured the footings and put the base
right,
below.
and then they put the block in, yes.
Okay. Now you also told me about something you remember over here in this direction. What can you tell me used to be over there?
Oh, that was Shorty Windesheimer.
Say that name again for us.
Shorty Windesheimer. He was a junk man, a welder, did welding. Not a very clean guy, and he had very good language.
So I've been told that Mr. Grebner would have to go over and talk to him every once in a while.
And that could be possible because he was that kind of a guy. I don't believe. His wife was very nice, and his daughter, but the house was a mess. Oh my God.
And so he
outside.
had a junkyard here.
Yes,
And
yeah.
he told me that he'd give you a quarter if you found a hubcap.
Yeah, if you found a hubcap, he'd give you a quarter if you brought it in.
Did you take those hubcaps off of cars?
No, I don't know. But every once in a while you'd find a hubcap, and he had them hanging. He'd have them hanging up in his garage. That was quite a garage.
Now that we've seen where it all began, we can continue on our journey. In 1887, the congregation built a separate 20 by 30 foot school building behind the existing parsonage, and it opened on October 2nd. When it first opened, it was just one classroom for all the lower grades. By 1932, it had been extensively remodeled and served as the lower grade school building. In 1889, Trinity's Board of Education was formed. It's interesting that in the 1950s, the Board of Ed's regular meetings were at 8 p.m. on a Friday evening. I wonder if that would be popular today. After Pastor Klaus retired in 1895, Reverend Thomas Wilson of Pontiac took over the role both as pastor and as day school teacher. He oversaw many milestones in our school's history until his departure in 1912. Fred Pifo was hired as Trinity's first full-time teacher. He was a graduate of Addison Normal School in Addison, Illinois, which later became Concordia University, Chicago. Mr. Pifo resigned after just 1 year. In 1901, George Gomjewski of Victor, Iowa, was brought on and served as a teacher for 3 years before resigning due to poor health. In 1904, Carl Roth of Ashland, Wisconsin, became Trinity's third teacher and stayed for 3 years before accepting another call in Chicago. That same year, on a Sunday, a fire swept through the village. And then again, the very next year, also on a Sunday. Those fires destroyed most of the business section, many residences, and the renowned Exchange Hotel. In 1905, Trinity followed through on a plan of building a more substantial church building on a piece of property acquired at the southeast corner of Van Dyke and Summers. Since then, Van Dyke has been widened and stands on a portion of the footprint of the brick 1905 church where school chapel services were held. The original church on the north end of Summers was converted into an upper grade building. It remained in that use until the first brick school building was built in 1948. During this time, the automobile was invented, Utica was growing, and electricity was starting to take over gas. In 1915, the Ladies' Aid replaced the gas lights at church with electric lights. Mr. W.C. Reen served as Trinity's fourth teacher until 1919. It was difficult to find another teacher to replace him after he left. Pastor Ernest Lurens took charge of the school for the first half of the 1919 school year. He was probably relieved that the services of a former student, Mr. A.C. Fritz, were procured to serve as a teacher from January to June. By 1923, Trinity exceeded 60 students, and Mr. P.C. Westerkamp, who was called to teach at Trinity in 1920, made the audacious request to have an assistant teacher. Mr. Erwin Pollux assisted from April to June. It seemed that Pastor Arthur Wuggeser was very instrumental in finding this candidate to help. The school building, the original church, was also expanded in 1923. The next year, Mr. Westerkamp's brother, Gerhard, a student at Concordia College in Nebraska, was hired and taught the lower grade students. In 1925, a permanent call to teach the lower grades was issued to Mr. Herbert Arndt of Concordia College in River Forest. He stayed at Trinity for 11 years. When Mr. Westerkamp resigned in 1929, Mr. Arndt began teaching the upper grades. Elmer Flieger, another Concordia River Forest graduate, became the lower grade teacher. The school year opened in 1932 with 73 students, 19 of which were new. The school had 12 first graders, the largest class to date, and kindergarten was not yet offered. In 1935, the Ladies' Aid Society raised $8,000 to build the parish house on Trinity's campus. Throughout its history, the parish house was used for Sunday school, youth activities, school classrooms, musical rehearsals, and meetings. In August of 1936, a significant person in Trinity's history joined the faculty, Winfred Grebner. Mr. Grebner began here as a teacher and ultimately became the school's principal before retiring in 1978 after faithfully serving Trinity Lutheran School for 42 years. Mr. Paul Seaman also joined the faculty in 1936. This is Elmer Metzner's 8th grade diploma from June of that year. It's interesting that a Trinity graduate received a certificate entitled Public School Diploma. Elmer's home sat on a piece of land that is now part of Trinity's property on the north side of the campus. It is enjoyed by our students today as a green space to play in. In 1941, enrollment at Trinity surpassed 100 students. 109 children attended Trinity that year. That is also the year that Trinity offered its first kindergarten class. We've talked a lot about the school, but life at Trinity Lutheran School and Trinity Lutheran Church are completely interwoven. Our mission is to create disciples who share Christ's story with love. Because of that mission, many Trinity students are also Trinity confirmands. Here's the 1943 confirmation class, pictured with Reverend Louis Heinecke, who was pastor from 1937 until his death in 1959. Trinity Lutheran School was growing quickly, but plans were made to expand its school to accommodate that growth. But those plans were interrupted by the outbreak of World War II.
I started school in 1939. In 1941, when Pearl Harbor was bombed, I remember all the kids left the school and we went to church and had a church service. And the community had all the members, a lot of people from all kinds of people from all around the church came to church on that day, and they were all dressed in black.
After the war, Trinity's congregation picked back up with the expansion plans for the school, and construction on the one-story brick building began in May of 1947 along Deshawn Street. The 5-classroom building was dedicated on Sunday, September 6, 1948. Two of Trinity's alumni discussed with us their time at Trinity during this era. John Ruggiero, perhaps Trinity's oldest alumni, and Robert Beck.
In the summertime, we played hardball, and in the wintertime, tin can hockey, which was only a tin can with a stick, and we would hammer that around in the wintertime.
We played softball. The school sponsored a team, and we played at recess, of course. And the Trinity linked up with Waldenburg and Macomb and Rochester and so on, and that was the league that we played in. And that was really tag football, the only two sports that they offered at the time.
You know, we just didn't have the equipment. We didn't have the gyms. We didn't have, and now everything is in a building, you know, and they have classes, and every grade has, we didn't have that at all, you know. Whatever we did, it came up out of the, you know, just when it happened, it happened. You didn't have a schedule.
To my knowledge, there wasn't a lot of special activities like you have today.
No, there wasn't. I started in that barracks type one, okay. And then as I got older, I went into the old church, and that was the 5th, 6th, 7th, and 8th grade.
How many classrooms were in those buildings?
One.
So everyone was in one classroom?
Yes. When taught me all the way through, and then I went into service, And when I came out, I went in the Walther League, and he was our counselor. So I grew up with him, and then in adult life, I was with him all the time. We bowled together, golfed together, and everything after that, you know.
Same memories for you?
Same memory, yep. When we went to bowling, I had a bowling league, started at Green Glen, which is on Ryan Road, kind of close to 22 Mile Road, and moved from there to Shelby Lanes, which is currently there. And it was a Lutheran league, and we occupied probably at Shelby Lanes, I think, 12 alleys. And then, of course, the Lutheran tournament in Bay City with John and Wynn, we were all went to that.
Who was the better bowler?
John.
Was Mr. Grebner the bowler?
Oh, yes.
Yes. Yep.
He was one of the best.
Yep.
In fact, I got a newspaper at home that when Cole Morgan had a bowling alley and Joe Lewis had a farm over on the west side of Utica, they had a bowling match, and our team beat Joe Lewis's team. And I got a paper on that.
What would be strange to kids?
Well, getting paddled by the school principal would probably be a little bit strange to the kids.
So Bob, were you ever paddled?
Oh, yes.
I got a licking, got a paddling at school, and went home and told Grandpa, and I got another one. So whatever happened at school, it was the law at home. I remember Pastor Heineke was with us every day for confirmation, and the confirmation class was in back room in the old 1889 church, 1882 church, and every morning that was our first class. I can also remember very distinctly that we would be assigned certain passages at confirmation, and so we all sat in a row, and then on confirmation day he'd switch our chairs around so that we couldn't memorize the ones that we always.
In 1948, the school population surpassed the 200 mark with 207 students and 6 teachers. That would have been about 35 children per teacher. Trinity alumnus Leroy Arf graduated in 1949 along with 17 other classmates. He recalled kindergarten through 2nd grade were taught in one room in the parish house, grades 3 through 5 taught in the smaller white building, and 6th through 8th in the former church building. He remembers coal stoves providing heat to the classroom, and he remembers the Sunday morning worship schedule as the 8:30 and 11 a.m. services were in English, while the 9:45 service was in German. Robert Beck attended Trinity from 1946 to 1954, and his 6 children were also students here. He too remembers the various buildings that served as a home to Trinity students. He saw the 1948 building being constructed and had classes there until his graduation. He even played a role in helping to raise money to build a gym by selling Christmas trees.
Back probably in the late 50s, the Walther League group decided that they wanted a gymnasium. And there were several members of the church, Ted Albertsberg and so on, that spearheaded that. And there was always, we had a Christmas tree sale to support that. And the Walther League people and the younger people of the church all took turns in selling the trees and so on. And originally it was located, the sales spot was located at 21 and Van Dyke. Yeah. And then it was later moved to where the parking lot is today, right across the street from the entrance of the church.
I'm going to fill in on him a little bit.
John worked for a local contractor, which was a member, Ray Mallow, member of Trinity. And he got one of the semis, and we'd go up into the western part of Michigan somewhere and pick up the trees.
Several long-serving teachers joined the Trinity faculty in the mid-1940s as well. Mr. Krensky from 1945 to 1975, and Mr. Beer from 1948 to 1979. In 1950, the Grebners built their family a new house across the street from the school. In the photos of construction, you can even see a young Judy Grebner in the window. Trinity purchased this home just a few years ago, and after some renovations, the house is now used as transitional housing for Trinity employees. By 1951, Trinity was home to 263 students, taught by Mr. Grebner, Mr. Krensky, Mr. Beer, Miss Hassler, Miss LeBurge, and Miss Saloga, with class sizes ranging from 19 to 39 students per grade. Trinity was now said to be at capacity and was the fourth largest Lutheran school in Michigan, just behind schools in Frankenmuth, St. Joseph, and Mount Clemens. There was no tuition for students who were members of Trinity, and non-members paid just $5 a month. Tuition payments were made at the Grebner's home. In fact, the church newsletter even published Mr. Grebner's phone number, 74151, so that parents interested in enrolling their children into kindergarten could contact him directly. During this time period, it was common for buildings to be sold and moved to a new location. That is precisely what happened in 1952 with the original wooden church building that had been converted into the upper grade school. The building was moved to Heidenreich Road and was used by the Clintondale School District. It has since been demolished. Remember Trinity's first parsonage? In 1952, it was purchased by the Elmer Bechter family, who moved it on to Deshawn Street and added a brick facade to the home. The lot was purchased by the Grebners, and the Betchers became their neighbors. Their grandson Tim remembers telling his teachers at Trinity that he was going to walk to Grandma's house for lunch. When he heard the bell ring from his grandma's house, he would report back to school. More and more female teachers began to serve at Trinity in the 1950s. Many of these women taught here for just a year or two, but some had a longer tenure. Like Gertrude Grebner, who was on staff with her husband from 1950 to 1972. And Miss Geraldine Miller, later Mrs. Teckel, who taught at Trinity from 1954 to 1959.
As a young child, I always told everyone someday I'd like to become a teacher. In 1941, when I was 5 years old, I started Trinity here and was a proud member of the first kindergarten that Trinity ever had. I think I was in the 8th grade. One day, Mr. Grebner, when I came to school, he said, "I got a job for you today." I says, "What's that?" He says, "Our 3rd grade teacher, she's sick today. I want you to take care of her class." He gave me a list of, the teacher's manuals. And I was only an 8th grader, and that got me excited about, it's pretty cool. I'd like to do that. I graduated from high school on a Thursday night in June in 1954. And the following Sunday morning, my parents and 2 brothers, Cliff Miller and Roger Miller, drove me to Concordia River Forest, Illinois, where I started summer school and started my teaching classes. I came back here to Utica back in August, and I became the 3rd grade teacher of Trinity, and my class had 46 3rd graders. Yes, you heard me right, 46. In the July of 1959, I married my husband, and my Miss Miller name changed to Mrs. Ivan Teckel. Later, when my children were a little older, I did much subbing here at Trinity and also for Utica Community Schools. So it kept me busy, and I was living my dream, becoming a teacher. I used to even, walk here. In fact, I started teaching before I ever had a driver's license. I was only 18 years old, you know. It's been a wonderful, wonderful experience for me and my family. And I thank Trinity for all they did for me all these years.
The 1950s brought about more and more discussion about the need for a new sanctuary and adding classrooms to meet the growth of both the church and the school, as Trinity met 1953 with over 300 students enrolled. In 1954, Trinity competed in basketball for the first time in the Lutheran School League. The Warriors finished with a dismal 2-6 record and ranked in second to last place. Their only wins that year were against the last place team, Emmanuel Waldenberg, now Emmanuel Macomb. Trinity installed new basketball backboards outside on the playground. It would be over 15 years before Trinity had an indoor gym of their own. In 1954, after the reaction of the Salk vaccine for polio, it was decided that Trinity's parish house would be the headquarters from which the vaccine will be administered to children from schools of the entire community. Former students remember when there was less traffic in our area. They recall students with stop signs stopping traffic on Hall Road so their classmates could cross. The Utica area experienced tremendous growth in the 1950s. Despite the enormous growth of the church and the school themselves, finances were a challenge. There were concerns about Trinity being able to meet their payroll needs, and Pastor Heineke displayed this concern that the momentum was being lost to raise funds for a much-needed building expansion. The fall of 1954 welcomed 336 students to Trinity. The smallest class size was 28 in kindergarten, and the largest was 52 in Miss Rosso's first grade class. A quote from the church newsletter said, "This is a considerable teaching load for one teacher. If this number increases, we shall have to make different arrangements." Miss Rosso, top left, already looks a little tired in this September 9th photo. That year, 22% of the Utica High School students' A honor roll and 23% of the B honor roll were graduates from Trinity Lutheran School. On August 18, 1955, Trinity's prayers were answered as Pastor Heineke broke ground on the new expansion for Trinity Lutheran Church and School. The 4-classroom addition was built first, followed by the sanctuary. But since the new building wasn't ready for another record-breaking enrollment year in 1955, a local public school allowed us to use 2 of their classrooms. 1956 opened up on September 11th with an all-time high of 377 students. There were 2 third-grade classrooms taught by Miss Miller and Miss Cope, perhaps the first time that there were 2 homerooms for a single grade. 1957 opened up with 386 students. Only 7 of those students are tuition-paying community members. The rest of the student body are members of Trinity Lutheran Church. That same year, Trinity suffered some damages from an arson fire. Believed to be the work of juvenile vandals, the fire caused $1,350 in damages. Trinity also helped establish a new mission church in Disco, which is now Peace Lutheran in Shelby Township. The school allowed members who transferred to Peace to continue to send their children to Trinity tuition-free. A first-year teacher in 1960 made a salary of $4,860. The salary scale topped out at 10 years with a salary of $6,000. 1960 graduate Cheryl Olenzak-Hippelhaus had fond memories of Mr. Grebner, Mr. Krensky, and Mr. Beer. The dress code then was similar to wearing your best church clothes with girls in dresses. Cheryl enjoyed being a Trinity cheerleader. That year, there were 456 students at Trinity. Despite the enormous growth in the area, Trinity often had financial obstacles. In an effort to help with Trinity's financial woes, in 1962, Stuart Vandervan, owner of the Utica Sentinel and a member of Trinity, offered to donate $1 from renewal and new subscriptions of the newspaper to Trinity to help with payroll and operational commitments. That year also marked the beginning of the school band program, started by Mr. Robert Ames. Mr. Himmler took over the band program the following year. Trinity also has a long-standing history of producing student-led plays and variety shows. By 1967, Trinity once again faced challenges of the student population outgrowing the facility. Charlene Myers, a sixth grade student, offered this in a church publication.
Trinity is quite a crowded place. It needs your money and help to build what it is meant to be. The teachers of Trinity are doing their best to get as many children into one room as possible. Some rooms have from 36 to 48 students. Trinity needs more room and more help from you. Would you please help the Trinity expansion plan? Thank you.
With school enrollment now over 500 students and a projected growth of over 200 students in the next 10 years, there were many things to consider. Should Trinity expand the present building, or maybe consider building in a new location? Should Trinity members be charged tuition in response to the growth? There was a great need and desire for a gymnasium. The congregation attempted to use the parish house for additional classrooms, but this idea was rejected by the fire marshal. In the end, Trinity's congregation adopted the theme, "By His Grace in This Place," which reflected the decision to develop plans to add on to the present building. Adjacent properties were acquired, and Trinity moved forward with a large expansion project. It was, is, and always will be Trinity's fervent goal to bring more people to Christ. By this time, Trinity was the second largest school in the state and the fifth largest Lutheran school in the nation. The 1968 basketball team finished the season in second place, especially commendable considering the limited practice time they had by borrowing the gym at other schools. The school operetta and band concerts were held in the Utica High Auditorium. Construction spanned over the next 2 years, with Phase 1 of the project concluding in 1969 with the addition of 7 new classrooms, our library, a multi-purpose room, and a remodel of 6 classrooms. Phase 2 in 1970 added the school gym, 2 more classrooms, and 2 youth rooms. Dedication Sunday was on September 27th, with Dr. Oswald Hoffman of the Lutheran Hour speaking. The congregation gathered outside of the addition for the dedication service. You can see how much Utica has changed since 1970. What is now our current parking lot was once filled with businesses. And with this new addition, we see another example of Trinity's commitment to reaching more people with the gospel message. In the fall of 1971, Utica Community Schools honored Trinity's long-serving principal, Mr. Win Grebner, for his leadership service in the community by naming the new Utica School on Saul Road W.M. Grebner Elementary School. 6th grade students began outdoor education in 1974. The first year, Trinity shared their week at camp with the students from St. John and Fraser.
I came to Trinity in 1966 as a new graduate from Concordia Teachers College, River Forest, Illinois. I taught 3rd grade for 6 years, and then my husband, whom I met at Trinity, and I decided to start our family. When our son was 3 years old, we sent him to Peace Preschool in Shelby, and I watched as Ellen Honstadt taught the children their ABCs and shared with them her love of Jesus. And I thought, we could do this at Trinity. So after much prayer and discussions, I wrote up a proposal and I gave it to Wynn Grebner, my principal, and the Board of Christian Education, and it was approved. So I asked my friend Elaine Jacobs if she would help me, and that summer of 1976, we ordered equipment and furniture, we set up our classroom, we developed a curriculum, and that September, we started with our first class of 3- and 4-year-old preschools. We're in that classroom just off the gym on the south side. And it was one classroom, and we were expanding and growing so fast that one summer, Elaine Jacobs and I knocked down the center wall between the two classrooms, hauled the cinder blocks out through the windows. Don Hagen helped us to develop that classroom, painted it, and we got it all set up. Well, God really blessed that program, and it developed year after year, and now, 47 years later, that early childhood program is a real ministry to Trinity, with the lunch bunch for 2s, 3- and 4-year-old preschool, young 5s, and kindergarten.
Deb Corning-Seekman graduated from Trinity in 1976. Mr. Beer was her choir director. Deb clearly remembers that choir posture was defined as sitting with your feet flat on the floor and your closed fists between the small of your back and the chair. Linda Hall Snyder remembered meeting Deb as well as Janice McQuaid in Mrs. Gass' 3rd grade class. They are still friends to this day. Lori Wellhausen graduated in 1981. Mrs. Angot was her cheerleading coach. She recalls participating in a cheer competition and taking home a first-place trophy. Trinity also participated in a few local parades. In 1982 and 83, Trinity Lutheran Church and School celebrated 100 years of proclaiming a changeless Christ to a changing world. In 1986, the city of Utica allowed Trinity to close Summer Street during school hours, allowing for much more safety as students moved back and forth to the playground areas. Heather Meitzner-Thompson remembers the fear of dissection, many athletic events, and flying to Washington, D.C. for their class trip. She said the faculty always cared for and supported the students. In the late 80s, Trinity once again faced the need for more room in the school, and work began on building our present 3-story addition in 1988. Bruce Kazmaka arrived from Wisconsin in 1987 and served as principal until 2008, making him the school's 2nd longest tenured principal. Rose Reamer served as an assistant principal throughout Mr. Kazmaka's time as administrator.
Coming to Trinity in 1987 was a very challenging decision, as I was called to serve as the first principal who was serving at Trinity from outside of the staff. But what was exciting about the call to Trinity was the opportunity to serve in a leadership role with 16 other individuals at that time, to focus on the renovation of our church and the rebuilding of our school. And so probably 6 months or so after I was here, we went into a very unique situation where we began to tear down a portion of our school. And so I can remember vividly the day of that demolition when that began. We brought the student body out in total from our preschool on up to 8th grade. We gathered on the north side of our playground, and the student body was present. The bulldozer approached with the wrecking ball, and at a particular time, which we counted down, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, the wrecking ball struck our school for the first time. And it began to tear down that single-story junior high wing in which my offices were housed. I can think back to that day, and for members of our faculty, members of our student body, there were a combination of cheers and clapping, and there were tears, and students were crying because of that demolition occurring. And that demolition prepared the way for what we now are blessed with at our church and school.
On April 29, 1990, the new $2.75 million addition was dedicated. Trinity had many new classrooms and office space at its disposal.
We taught gym, and we were not gym teachers. And so it was 100 ways to play kickball. And so it got down to about 50 ways to play kickball. And then I said, Anna, I don't know about this. And she said in her soft voice, Kathy, there are many skills that you learn in kickball, with a twinkle in her eye. And we just laughed. But yes, we taught that. We taught our own music, our own art. And of course, we ate with the kids. We were out in the playground. But that time in the playground, I call them the P&P, playground and pals. We were just, that's where, it's just really camaraderie and that kind of thing.
Stephanie Angok McPherson was a student at Trinity until 1998. She remembers Mrs. Reamer's M&M collection. And Katie Addis Lindhurst, a 1997 graduate and current junior high teacher at Trinity, fondly remembers a stunt pulled by Mr. Kosmaka.
I was up on that roof, to be honest with you, I think 3 days.
I thought it was just like one day you were up there. You were up there for several days?
Yes, yeah, I think so, yeah. I'll tell you, being up there for several days allowed me to really enjoy that role. I got a lot of personal reading done.
Diane Mowell shows us some memories of Trinity in the era of the 1980s and early 1990s. The sound of Velcro from opening a Trapper Keeper fills classrooms, along with stickers and Garbage Pail Kid trading cards. Computers made their first appearance at Trinity during this time. In 1995, Mr. TG left the second grade to teach computers full-time so that all the grades could have a computer class. After school, there were meetings for brownies, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, and Boy Scouts. On meeting days, students were allowed to wear their Scout uniforms to school. In 2003, the church added electric signs to the campus. This helped market our church and school to those passing by. Now, 20 years later, we're excited to see another new update to our signs. In 2005, with money raised from our school's auctions, Trinity was able to build our present-day early childhood playground for our preschool program.
During National Lutheran Schools Week, we did a number of things. Sometimes we had most of the time we had a theme, and we would decorate our rooms and the hallways and things like that with that. And then we also had activities, one of them being a volleyball game between the faculty in the 8th grade. And I was lucky enough to be asked to referee that. And so a few times I came in with my son-in-law's goalie hockey gear and wore that. And a few times I wore my kayaking helmet. And a few times I steered the scoring so that the 8th graders could win. I'm sure everybody knew that, but tried to do it subtly.
After Mr. Kosmaka's retirement, Mr. Tom Raggi took over as Trinity's administrator for the next 6 years. In 2010, the school realized that an all-day program was needed for our preschool. Families with both parents working needed a place to send their toddlers before and after school. Thanks to Mrs. Angot and Mrs. Borchety, an all-day preschool program was opened. Under the direction of Mrs. Sherry Danielle, we now have over 100 children in the preschool program. Renovations on the 3rd floor were underway, and in 2013 they were completed. A computer lab was moved to the top floor, along with 3rd and 4th grade classes. The 8th grade class trip to Washington was always a highlight for our junior high students, but a side trip had recently been added for the 8th graders to go to New York City. Mr. Gordon Kennedy served as interim school principal for the 2014-2015 school year, and I was called to serve as Trinity's principal beginning in the fall of 2015, and I am honored to be present during our 140th anniversary celebration. For many years, our 7th grade students took part in a full-day trip to see our state capitol in Lansing. But for the past several years, the 7th graders and many of their parents have enjoyed an overnight trip to the Creation Museum and the Ark Encounter in Kentucky to learn more about God's creation. Trinity has a rich history of investing in our students' music. Kids use their gifts to lead worship services, to praise Jesus, and to participate in concerts and festivals. Many of our students today have parents and even grandparents that attended Trinity. Students at Trinity continue to receive opportunities to share the gospel message by leading chapel. In November 2019, a new $125,000 playground was installed. The work was done by volunteers just as the weather began to turn cold and snow. In 2019, Trinity had the honor of being named a School of Distinction by the National Lutheran School Accreditation Commission. This award places Trinity in the top 5% of Lutheran schools nationwide. Dr. Rebecca Schmidt, Director of School Ministry at the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, said, "The award of school distinction is a great accomplishment and demonstrates a school's commitment to provide an outstanding quality Christian education for the children it serves. Daily, students hear the gospel message of the promise of eternal life in Christ with an excellent academic program." But in March of 2020, education at Trinity faced an unparalleled challenge, as it did around the country and around the world. The coronavirus triggered a pandemic the likes of which we had not seen in nearly a century, and for the first time in 137 years, Trinity's hallways went silent in the final months of the school year. In one weekend, the school went digital. Even the faculty social events were held online. Celebrating 8th grade graduation turned into a multi-day caravan to each student's front lawn for an individual graduation service. The new school year brought strange experiences for our staff and students, like spaced out desks and masks, even when playing sports. This was not an experience we ever want to repeat. However, we were reminded once again that our Savior is at our side. This is His school. Jesus has led Trinity through its darkest days and its finest hours during the last 140 years. He has preserved this education ministry so that we may continue to create disciples who share Christ's story with love.
What does graduating from a Lutheran school mean to these boys and girls? It means that the pupils are completing a course of study in a school in which not only secular branches, as reading, arithmetic, and history are taught, so they may grow into useful citizens, but it also means that they are being graduated from a school in which they are instructed in Christian doctrine daily, where every school session is opened with appropriate devotion, and where every secular study is taught in strict accordance with our Christian principles. It should, therefore, be the proud hope of every Lutheran child and the fond wish of its parents that it may not only attend a Lutheran school, but that it may eventually be privileged to be graduated from it. A Lutheran child's first diploma should be a Lutheran diploma. Herbert Arndt, 1932.
I was pleased in general that God directed the vast number of those families to say, yes, we want what Trinity Lutheran School is all about. And one of the things that I mentioned earlier, that is so critical for our new families is for them to understand that this is not a private school, even though many will call it a private school. This is a Christian day school. And I really tried to talk in those meetings to the dads especially, saying, Dad, you are the head of that home. And so as you might be viewing this, moms and dads and grandpas and grandmas, it's so important that you are a role model for your children in terms of your faith, because the faith of your children is so important, and it begins right in that home. And as a Christian day school, Trinity is here to support you, but not replace you. And so please make sure that you continue, even when those young people who are now maybe in 6th grade, are high schoolers or out of high school, to continue to encourage them to worship in God's house, study His Word, and you be those role models. The work that we then will do together will be most successful, because we're going to have young people that have gone through this marvelous Christian day school, but that eventually will go to a marvelous sight, and that's with our Lord in heaven.